On the morning of February 28, 2026, the world woke up to a terrifying headline. The supreme leader of Iran had just been killed. The skies above the nation of Iran were suddenly filled with explosions. Iran was in danger. Sirens screamed across the city. Missiles were shot. Military commanders rushed into emergency rooms. Within few minutes, the truth became clear. This was not just an accident. It was the beginning of a dangerous operation ordered by the United States against Iran. This was Operation Epic Fury, a direct order from President Donald Trump to take out the Iranian leadership and destroy their weapons. Mind you, for more than 40 years, these two powerful nations have lived like enemies across an ocean. Missiles, sanctions, secret weapons, and political angers have shaped their relationship. Many times, the world feared a full war might break out. But the truth is, this conflict did not start today. It started decades ago. Now, to understand the conflict between Iran and the United States, we have to go back in time. This is a story of friends who became the worst enemy. The story did not start with war. It started with power, oil, and control. In this documentary, we follow the long road of power, revenge, and silent war that finally exploded into chaos. This is Fame and Fallout. Long ago, the United States and Iran were not enemies. In fact, they were friends. But over time, events happened that slowly turned friendship into anger and distrust. To properly understand how this conflict started, we first need to take the situation back to the 1950s. In the early 1950s, Iran was a very different place. It was a proud democratic nation with a parliament. The most popular man in the country was Dr. Mohammad Mossadegh. Mohammad was a politician, author, and lawyer who served as a prime minister of Iran from 1951 to 1953. He was an old skinny man who often wore his pajamas during meetings. But the people loved him that way. They elected him as their prime minister because he promised them one big thing: Iran's oil should belong to Iran.
One of his rare appearances, Mohammad Mossadegh, Premier of Iran, meets the press to reaffirm his government's unwillingness to arbitrate with Britain over nationalizing the Anglo-Iranian oil company. With chances of a settlement fading, the West's best hope is that this sickly man, in whose frail hands may lie the key to peace, is as anti-Russian as he is anti-British.
You see, Iran at the time was the country with the most oil produced in the world. Oil was becoming the most valuable resources on earth. Countries needed it for cars, factories, aeroplanes, and military power, and only Iran had a lot of it, making them extremely important to the world because of one thing: oil. But here was the problem. Even though the oil was in Iran's land, most of the profits were controlled by a British company called the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company. This company owned all of the Iran's oil wealth. They took most of the money and gave Iran very little. For many Iranians, this was deeply unfair. Imagine having a huge treasure under your land, but most of the money goes to another country. That was exactly how many people in Iran felt. Workers in the oil field were often paid very little money. At the same time, foreign companies were making huge profits from Iran's resources. This anger slowly started building inside the country. Many Iranian politicians began to say something very simple: Iran should control its own oil. And one of the strongest voices supporting this idea was Mohammad Mossadegh. He was not a dictator. He was a politician who believed strongly in Iranian independence. So Mohammed nationalized the oil, which meant the oil would now belong to Iran, not foreign companies anymore. So for many Iranians, this was a proud moment. Crowds celebrated in the streets. They believed their country was finally taking control of its future. But in London, the reaction was completely different. Britain was furious. The Anglo-Iranian Oil Company had been making huge profits from Iran for decades. So losing that control meant losing billions of dollars. So Britain began looking for a way to stop Mohammed. At first, they tried economic pressure. They placed an oil embargo on Iran. They tried to stop other countries from buying Iranian oil. This caused serious economic problems inside Iran. But Mohammed refused to back down. He refused to let the British take over the control of Iran's oil. He believed Iran had the right to control their own resources. But this made him an enemy to the British. They began to target him because he was the leader of Iran and the person who initiated the blockade on the British company. But they didn't know how to remove him from power. If they attacked the Iranians, there was going to be a problem. So the British went through another route to forcefully remove Mohammed from Iran. They did it through the Cold War with the help of the United States. Let me break it down to you. To understand how Mohammed was removed from power, we first need to talk about the Cold War. In the 1950s, the United States and Russia were in a Cold War, fighting to see who could be the most powerful. It was not a gunfight, it was just land possession. Both sides were afraid of losing their influence in the world. They wanted to control other small nations around them. The United States wanted to have control over the small countries, same way that Russia wanted to have control over the small nations. It was a fight for power. You see, Iran were at the middle of these conflicts. They were very important during this time. In fact, they were closer to Russia and they might likely submit to them. So the United States thought, if Iran should decide to stay under the control of Russia, then the British would no longer have access to the oil wells. Russia would take it. And that would be a very big loss to the British. So the British thought about something. They lied to the United States of America. They said, if you don't stop Mohammed, he will join Russia and we are going to lose a lot. Now because of this, the United States of America sent the CIA to attack and remove Mohammed from power. In August 1953, the British CIA bribed some Iranian soldiers to arrest Mohammad Mossadegh. It was called a bloodless coup. It was a secret plan to remove him from power and replace him with someone that they can control. They didn't care about his democracy. They only cared about stopping Russia from getting Iran's oil. And they were successful with it, because Mohammad Mossadegh was captured by the Iranian military officers who carried out the arrest under the British order. After the arrest, he was put on trial for treason. The new government accused him of trying to destroy monarchy and create chaos in the country. They also accused him of trying to sell the oil wealth to the Russians. That was how the United States turned Mohammed against his people. And that moment marked the beginning of the problem in Iran. That moment would later become the biggest reason why Iran began to distrust the United States. After the arrest of Mohammad Mossadegh in 1953, Iran changed from a struggling democratic nation into a powerful and flashy country. But underneath the surface, a giant explosion was building. The United States and British had took over the oil once again. Remember, before the coup, Mohammed had kicked the British out. But after the coup, the new government signed a new deal that allowed the British back into the country. It was called the Consortium Agreement of the 1954. The Western companies were back in control of the pipes and the ships. This made Iran feel like their country had been sold to the West. But they couldn't do anything because it was their new leaders who sold their oil wealth to the British. From that moment, Iran entered a completely new political era. A new leader was installed. His name was Mohammad Pahlavi. He was also called Shah, which means king. You see, Pahlavi became the absolute boss. He wasn't just a king anymore, he was a dictator. He started calling himself the King of Kings, which was Shah. He wanted to turn Iran into a global power. He launched a massive plan called the White Revolution. This wasn't a war. It was a fast-track plan to make the Iran look like Europeans and Americans. He took lands from big religious landlords and gave it to poor farmers. He gave women the right to vote and encouraged them to go to universities and work as doctors and lawyers. He sent thousands of soldiers into villages to teach students how to read and write. To the outside world, the Shah was a hero. He was building schools and reforming Iran to be a modern country. But inside, Pahlavi was said to be a weapon of the British. While he was building the nation, he was also building a nightmare. He was a dictator and no one dares to speak against his government. He knew that many people still love Mohammad Mossadegh and hated the 1953 coup. He wanted to shun out every supporters of Mossadegh. He wanted to stay in power forever, selling the country's oil wealth to the British and controlling Iran. So he created a secret police force called SAVAK. The SAVAK was trained by the British CIA. They were everywhere. They sat in universities' classrooms. They were the secret police of Iran. Their job was to watch the population and stop political oppressions. Any person suspected of criticizing the government would be questioned, arrested, and punished. If you complain about the price of bread or the Shah's relationship with the Americans, the SAVAK police would take you away in the middle of the night. Thousands of students, writers, and religious leaders were put in prison and tortured. Now, this created a deep silent anger in the hearts of the people. And because of this, many people became afraid to speak openly against Pahlavi's government. For some Iranians, life became more controlled, and that was where the torture began. The relationship between the Pahlavi's government and the British government was like a complicated business deal that lasted for decades. It was built on two things: oil and power. The British treated the Shah like a junior partner. For many years, the Americans owned all the Iran's oil. They were making billions of dollars while the Iranian people remained poor. The British lived in a luxury compound in Iran while the Iranian workers lived in shackles. Iran and United States became very close allies. The Pahlavi's government depended heavily on American support. The United States gave Iran financial help, military equipment, and political backing. American advisors also began working with the Iranian government to help organize the military and the economy. You see, oil money played a huge role in this development. Iran's oil industry was producing large amounts of revenue, and Pahlavi was using that money to strengthen the country and also buy advanced weapons from the United States. By the 1970s, Iran had one of the strongest militaries in the Middle East. The British loved this because they were getting cheap oil from Iran and then selling that same oil money back to the Iran in exchange of weapons. It was a perfect circle of money. From the outside, Iran looked like a country moving towards rapid modernization, but underneath the surface, problem was growing. Many people believed the Shah ruled with too much power. Elections had little real competitions. Political opposition was limited. Critique of the government sometimes faced arrest or intimidation. Pahlavi's government, also known as the Shah, had become totally uncontrollable. It was dining and wining with the British and the United States who were taking their oil wealth. During the 1970s, Iran became very healthy because of rising of oil prices. But not the whole of the country enjoyed the oil wealth. Some people became extremely rich, while many rural communities still lived in poverty. By 1971, the Shah was incredibly rich. He decided to show the world that he was the greatest king on earth. In fact, he threw a party to celebrate 2,500 years of the Persian Empire. He invited other kings, queens, and presidents from all over the world, including the British royals. While the Shah was spending over $100 million on a party, many Iranians were starving. The British and the Americans were there, smiling and drinking, which made the Iranian people feel like the West was laughing at their poverty. And so in 1973, the revolution changed. Pahlavi's government was overthrown. By the late 1970s, the Iranian people couldn't take it anymore. They were tired of the SAVAK police killing students, and they were tired of the Shah trying to make Iran look like a Western country. Small protests began to appear in the cities. At first, they were limited, but the protests continued to grow. Large crowds filled the streets demanding political change. Workers began going on strike, including employees in the oil industry. These strikes damaged the economy and weakened the Pahlavi's government. Many protesters demanded that the Shah step down from power. They said he was a slave to the West and they wanted him out. Some religious leaders also opposed the Pahlavi's government. They believed he was moving Iran away from the Islamic traditions. The whole of Iran was against him. There was massive riot everywhere. Security forces tried to control the protests, but it only became larger, and it looked like Pahlavi was no longer safe in his nation. So he started looking up to the United States and the British, who were once his friend. He was calling for help. He expected them to send soldiers or support him to fight his own people. But to his greatest surprise, the United States didn't come to his aid. In fact, they ignored him because they saw that he was going to lose the fight against the Iranians. And the United States didn't want to have anything to do with him if he eventually lost. Well, all they wanted was the oil wealth. Finally, in January 1979, the Shah was forced to leave Iran. He couldn't handle the pressure. He was sick with cancer and broken-hearted. When he left the country, many Iranians celebrated in the streets. They believed the long rule of the monarchy had finally ended. One of the strongest voices who was a critic of Pahlavi's government was installed as the new leader. His name was Ruhollah Khomeini. He was a religious scholar. And within a short time, Iran became an Islamic republic under a new revolutionary government. After Pahlavi left Iran in 1979, he ran to the United States for medical treatment. He was allowed to stay there by the new president of the United States at the time. He had escaped justice from the Iranians. But back home in Iran, Ruhollah Khomeini had become the new leader. Iran became a new type of nation called the Islamic Republic of Iran. This meant that religious leaders now had strong political power. But another huge problem was about to begin. Unlike the Shah, who wanted Iran to be more like a Western country, Khomeini wanted Iran to be ruled by Islamic law. He called the United States the Great Satan because he believed the US had too much control over Iran's oil and politics. Khomeini believed that Islamic scholars should guide the country's political decision. A new constitution was written, giving religious leaders strong authority over the country. During this time, many revolutionary groups were active in Iran. People were still angry about the Shah rule and the role of the foreign power. The country was changing very quickly, and the relationship with the United States was becoming more tense, and conflict was about to break out. Well, the biggest spark that started the modern conflict between them started in November 1979. In November 1979, something happened in Iran that shocked the whole world. A group of Iranian students gathered outside the American embassy in Tehran. They were angry and emotional. They believed the United States had protected the Shah for many years. Now, the Shah had entered America for medical treatment, and many Iranians feared the United States might help him to return to power again. So the students in Iran broke into the US embassy in Tehran. They took 52 Americans hostage and kept them for 444 days. The students said they were doing this to protest against the United States.
This is a message of the students in the American Embassy of Tehran. We are not against the people of the USA. We are against of the United States policy in Iran.
They wanted Americans to return the Shah to Iran so he could face trial. Many Iranians supported the students. Huge crowd gathered on the streets shouting angry slogans against the United States. The new Iran leader, Khomeini, supported the action. He called the United States the Great Satan. Well, this event caused the United States to cut all diplomatic ties with Iran. In the United States, the news shocked the public. Every day, American television showed updates about the hostage. The American government demanded their release, but the Iranians refused, and the crisis continued. At one point, the United States tried a secret rescue mission. American helicopter flew towards Iran to rescue the hostage, but the mission failed after an accident in the desert. Several American soldiers died, and the rescue plan was cancelled.
It was my decision to attempt the rescue operation. It was my decision to cancel it when problems developed in the placement of our rescue team for a future rescue operation. The responsibility is fully my own.
But 444 days later, the hostages were finally released in January 1981. By then, the relationship between Iran and the United States was completely broken. The two countries stopped trusting each other. What began as a protest became one of the most famous international crises in modern history. After the hostage crisis ended in January 1981, the relationship between Iran and the United States was completely broken. For many years before that moment, the two countries had worked together. But after the hostages were released, the United States cut off almost all official relationship with Iran. First, the United States placed economic sanctions on Iran. This meant American companies could not do business with Iran anymore, and any financial connections were stopped. Iran money that was held in American bank was also frozen. Second, the two countries closed their embassies. This meant they no longer had diplomats speaking directly with each other. Communication became very limited. Iran became United States' worst enemy at the time, and they were isolated from the Western world. But while this tension was still going on, another major event happened in the Iran region. It was the Iran-Iraq War. In 1980, just months after the Iranian Revolution against the United States, Iran was attacked by Iraq, which was their neighboring country. Iraq was led by Saddam Hussein at the time. You see, Saddam Hussein wanted to take advantage of the chaos in Iran after its revolution and to gain control of the borders and the rich oil area in Iran. He wanted to enjoy the same thing that the United States were enjoying, so he started the Iran-Iraq War. The war began on September 22, 1980, when he ordered the Iraqi army to invade Iran. He thought Iran was weak because they had just finished a revolution. He also wanted to control a river called Shah al-Arab. In the beginning, Iraq army moved quickly and took over some Iranian land, but Iranian forces fought back fearlessly. Iran was determined to defend its land, especially after the revolution had united many people with strong national pride. During this war, the United States mostly supported Iraq because they didn't want Khomei's revolution to spread. The US gave Iraq intelligence and money. One of the most tragic moments for Iran was in 1988 when a US Navy ship accidentally shot down an Iran civilian airplane, killing all 290 people on board. It became apparent that the United States were supporting Iraq to destroy Iran. The fight was brutal. Both sides used large armies, tanks, artillery, and aircraft. Many battles involved trench warfare, where soldiers fought in a long line of trenches, similar to what happened in the World War I. Thousands of innocent people were killed or injured by these poisonous gases, making war even more terrifying. However, the Iranian people were very proud and religious. Millions of young men and even boys volunteered to fight back. But despite years of fighting, neither side was able to win a clear victory. By the mid-1980s, the war had caused huge destruction. Factories, towns, farms, and oil fields were damaged. Economies suffered, and both countries were left struggling to rebuild. By 1988, both countries were completely exhausted and broke. Their cities were destroyed, and about 1 million people had died. After the Iran-Iraq war ended in 1988, the relationship between Iran and the United States remained very tense. They never became friends again. Instead, they entered a long period of shadow war where they fought through other groups and economic sanctions. Even though the fight with Iraq stopped, the anger towards the US did not. Iran was still furious about a US Navy ship that shot down an Iranian civilian airplane just before the war ended, which killed about 290 people on board. Iran saw this as a deliberate act, while the United States said it was an accident during a tense moment in the war. This tragedy made people in both countries even more distrust of each other. New tensions continued to grow in the years that followed. One big issue after the war was the United States blaming the Iran for supporting groups that attacked Americans and the US allies in the Middle East. At the same time, the United States worried that the Iran's Islamic government was hostile and spreading its influence across the nation. This made the US leaders see Iran as a threat to American interests and to the stability of the world. After the year 2000, new issues such as Iran's nuclear program became major points of conflict. The United States accused Iran of trying to develop nuclear weapons, while Iran insisted that the program was for peacefulness. These disagreements led to more sanctions and diplomatic battles. Khomei's health began to weaken in the late 1980s, especially after many years of intense political struggle with the Iran and Iraq war. By June 3, 1989, He had suffered multiple health crises and died at the age of 89. His death marked the end of an era for Iran. It was the passing of the man who had led the country through revolution, war, and dramatic change. Khomeini was the founder of the Islamic Republic in Iran. His funeral was one of the largest in history, with about 10 million people attending to say goodbye to their leader. After Khomeini's death, a big question was raised: who would replace him? In Iran's system, the next supreme leader is chosen by a group of powerful religious clerics called the Assembly of Experts. Originally, Khomeini had named a man called Ali Montezari as his successor, but Montezari was removed from that position in 1988 because of how he criticized the Khomeini government. This left a vacancy in the succession plan. Montezari was no longer available. This allowed Ali Khamenei to be selected as the new supreme leader on June 4, 1989. Khamenei was chosen because he had loyalty to the revolution and strong ties with Iranic Islamic establishment. Over the next decade, he became the most powerful figure in Iran with control over the military, judiciary, and major political decisions. But even when Khamenei became Iran's supreme leader, the relationship with the United States had become more tense and hostile. Khamenei often warned Iranians not to trust the United States. He believed the US wanted to weaken Iran's Islamic government and control the Middle East. For many years, he criticized Americans' policy and called them unfair to Iran. In defense, the United States continued to accuse Iran of trying to build nuclear weapons, while Iran said the program was only for peaceful energy. Because of this, the relationship between Iran and the United States during Khamenei's leadership was mostly being defined by mistrust, sanction, and political confrontation rather than cooperation. Khamenei became the US worst nightmare in Iran. After the Iran-Iraq war ended in 1988, after Khomeini died and Khomeini became the new leader, the United States and Iran continued their bitter rivalry in what was called Shadow War. The Shadow War was a period of almost 40 years where the United States and Iran were bitter enemies. But they did not fight a full-scale open war. Instead of sending their own big armies against each other, both sides supported other groups to fight on their behalf. The two countries mostly avoided each other. In 2001, when the 9/11 attack happened in America, the US President George Bush claimed that Iran was part of an axis of evil.
This is a regime that agreed to international inspections, then kicked out the inspectors. This is a regime that has something to hide from the civilized world. States like these and their terrorist allies constitute an axis of evil, arming to threaten the peace of the world.
They accused them of being a part of the attack. Now, this made Iranians very scared and angry because it sounded like a threat of invasion, but a fight didn't happen. In 2003, when the US invaded Iraq, Iran became more tensed because Iraq was right next to Iran, which means the US could easily attack them too. Iran responded by supporting the group in Iraq that fought against American soldiers. Again, during the 2000s, many of Iran's nuclear scientists were targeted in secret attack. Iran blamed the US and Israel for this shadow operation. In the 2010s, tensions became even higher. Iran continued supporting groups across the Middle East, while the US tried to stop Iran's influence. In 2015, something surprising happened. Iran and several world power countries signed the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, also known as the Iran Nuclear Deal. This deal means that Iran agreed to stop its nuclear weapon produce in exchange for the US lifting some economic punishment. In other words, if Iran could stop their nuclear weapons, they would be allowed to sell more oil and trade more freely with other countries. This deal was meant to reduce mistrust and make the world safer from the threat of nuclear weapons. But in 2018, the US President Donald Trump forfeited the deal. He withdrew from the deal and reimposed sanctions. Iran became angry and unsettled. In January 2020, the Shadow War almost became a real war when the US Army killed Iran's top general, Qasem Soleimani, with a drone. Soleimani was one of Iran's most powerful military leaders. Iran became very angry and promised revenge. Well, a few days later, Iran fired missiles at American military base in Iraq, where US soldiers were stationed. Luckily, no American soldiers were killed, but many were injured. The world feared that a full war could begin. The two countries came very close to open war. From 2020 to 2025, the shadow war continued through cyber attack, regional conflicts, and proxy groups in places like Syria, Iraq, and Yemen. Iran also increased its nuclear activities again, which made the United States become more worried. They feared that Iran might one day launch the nuclear bomb, but the US didn't know how to attack them directly. They were waiting for another nation to do it so they could support in the attack. And that was when Israel launched an attack on Iran. Israel noticed that Iran had enough materials to build a nuclear bomb, so they launched a surprise attack. On June 22, 2025, the United States joined Israel. Together, they bombed many underground labs where Iran was working on its nuclear technology. Iran fought back by firing hundreds of missiles and using suicide drones. After 12 days of heavy fighting, a ceasefire was signed. Both sides stopped shooting, but they were still very angry. The US told Iran they must stop all nuclear work forever, otherwise they get banned from trading with other countries. But Iran refused to agree to the rules. They wanted to continue building their nuclear weapon, and that was the beginning of the war that would finally break out a year later in 2026. Throughout the rest of 2025, Iran's economy got much worse. Because of the war and more sanctions, people in Iran had a hard time buying food. Each protest started in the streets, and Iran's government blamed the US for the trouble. By early 2026, the shadow war became a real war. And here was how it happened. In January and February, groups supported by Iran attacked US ships and bases more often. The US warned that a massive response was coming if the attack did not stop. Well, on February 28, 2026, the real big war began. The United States and Israel launched an operation called Operation Epic Fury. They attacked many parts of Iran's military and defense system. It was much larger than the short fight in 2025. This time, the goal was not just to stop nuclear work, but to destroy Iran's military leaders. On that night, hundreds of US and Israeli planes flew over Iran. They hit more than 500 targets, including missile sites, drone factories, and government buildings in the capital city of Iran. The most shocking moment happened during this attack. The supreme leader, Ali Khamenei, was killed when missiles hit his high-security compound. This caused a lot of panic and confusion within the Iran government, because Khamenei had been the boss over 36 years. Without him, the military of Iran would struggle to organize a defense. The US military also moved more ships and thousands of soldiers into Iran. They wanted to make sure Iran cannot block the Strait of Hormuz, where a lot of world oil travels. They fought off Iran's suicide boats and drones that were trying to sink oil tanks. This kept the global economy from crashing during the war. The Iran military was trying to fight back using mobile missiles launcher, but they were struggling because their top commanders were lost in the first attack. However, the US and Israel used advanced weapon systems to shoot down most of those missiles before they landed. As of March 2026, the operation is still going on. The US military is now using smaller drones to find and destroy mobile missiles launcher hidden in the mountains. They are calling this a cleanup phase. Many people are worried about the civilians living in Iran, while the United States are saying they only wanted to hit military targets. The war has caused many deaths and left many cities without electricity or water as the fight continues. Because this operation involved direct military strikes inside Iran, it was widely seen as a turning point, moving the long period of shadow conflict into an open military confrontation between Iran and the United States. Many countries in Europe and Asia are worried that if the war doesn't end soon, it will turn into a World War III scenario. They are afraid that Iranian supporters like Group of Lebanon or Yemen will start attacking even more cities, making the conflict spread across the entire map. For almost 40 years, Iran and the United States were enemies. They did not fight a full war, but they kept attacking each other in secret ways. Sometimes it was through sanctions, sometimes through cyber attack, sometimes through other groups in the Middle East. But in the end, the truth became clear. When powerful nations keep fighting for many years, the people are the ones who suffer the most. Families lose loved ones, cities lived in fear, and the world becomes more dangerous. Now the question remains, will these two nations finally choose peace? Hope you enjoyed the story. For more videos like this, don't forget to subscribe and turn on your notification button so you won't miss other amazing documentaries like this one. You can also click here for more fame and fallout stories.